The gunshot echoed through the tiny cabin just as Olivia Nelson's arm cracked against the iron stove, and she knew in that moment that if she stayed another minute, her husband would kill her. Blood trickled down her forearm where the bone had snapped, white hot pain shooting through her body as Martin fired another round into the ceiling, his whiskey-soaked rage filling every corner of their home in the Wyoming territory. She did not think, did not grab a coat or provisions, just ran through the door into the howling January blizzard of 1877, her thin cotton dress already soaking through as snow pelted her face, and the wind tried to push her back toward the hell she was fleeing. The cold bit into her skin like 1,000 needles, but the pain in her arm throbbed worse, a constant reminder of Martin's hands shoving her across the room when she had asked him to please stop drinking. 3 years of marriage had turned her hopeful heart into something small and frightened, and tonight, when he had struck her for the last time, something inside her had finally broken along with her bone. She stumbled through snowdrifts that reached her knees, her right arm hanging uselessly at her side, cradled against her chest as she fought to keep moving. The cabin disappeared behind a wall of white within seconds, and she had no idea which direction she was heading, only that she had to get away. Her feet were already numb inside her worn leather boots, and her fingers had lost all feeling. The blizzard screamed around her, disorienting and vicious, and Olivia realized with growing horror that she might die out here in the frozen wilderness. But even that seemed preferable to going back to Martin and his fists and his hatred. She pushed forward, crying out when she tripped over a buried log and fell hard onto her injured arm. The pain was so intense she nearly vomited, black spots dancing across her vision as she lay in the snow, wondering if this was how it would end. "Get up," she told herself. "Get up or die here." She forced herself to her knees, then to her feet, swaying dangerously as the wind nearly knocked her down again. Blood had soaked through her sleeve now, mixing with the melting snow, and her teeth chattered so violently she bit her tongue. How long had she been walking? Minutes? Hours? Time had lost all meaning in the white void that surrounded her. She could not see more than a few feet in any direction, could not tell if she was walking in circles or heading toward help or stumbling off a cliff. Then her foot caught on something and she was falling again, tumbling down a slope she had not seen, her body rolling through the snow until she came to rest at the bottom of what felt like a gully. This time she could not get up. The pain in her arm was too much, and the cold had seeped so deep into her bones that her limbs would not obey her anymore. She lay there in the snow, curled on her side, watching the white flakes fall onto her eyelashes as her consciousness began to slip away. She thought of her mother, dead these past 5 years, and wondered if she would see her soon. She thought of the girl she had been at 18, full of dreams about love and marriage, and how foolish that girl had been to believe Martin's sweet words. She thought about how she would never see spring again, never feel the sun on her face, or smell wildflowers or taste fresh bread. The cold was not so bad anymore. In fact, she was starting to feel almost warm, which some distant part of her mind recognized as a very bad sign. The sound of hoofbeats seemed impossible, like something from a dream. Then strong hands were turning her over, and a man's voice was cutting through the howl of the wind, urgent and worried. She tried to open her eyes but could not manage it, tried to speak, but her lips would not form words. She felt herself being lifted, felt the warmth of a horse beneath her and a solid chest at her back as arms wrapped around her, holding her secure. "Stay with me," the voice said close to her ear. "Just stay with me. I have got you now." She wanted to tell him about her arm, about Martin, about how tired she was, but the darkness was pulling her under, and she could not fight it anymore. The last thing she registered was the steady rhythm of the horse's gait and the feeling of safety in the stranger's arms. Olivia woke to warmth and pain in that order. The warmth came from thick blankets piled on top of her and a fire crackling somewhere nearby. The pain came from her arm, which throbbed with such intensity that she cried out before she was fully conscious, Immediately, someone was beside her, and she forced her eyes open to see a man's face hovering above hers, creased with concern. Easy now, he said, his voice the same one from the blizzard. You are safe, but I need to set your arm, and it is going to hurt something fierce. She blinked at him, trying to focus through the haze of pain and exhaustion. He had dark hair, almost black, and eyes the color of a summer sky. His face was weathered from years in the sun, with lines around his eyes and mouth that suggested he smiled often, though he was not smiling now. He looked to be in his late 20s, maybe 30, with broad shoulders and capable hands. Who are you? She managed to whisper, her throat raw. Name is Colt Jennings, he said. I am a ranch hand at the Double Creek spread about 10 miles west of here. Found you in the gully during the storm. You are lucky I was out checking on strays, though I suppose you might not feel very lucky right about now. My husband, she started to say, and immediately his expression darkened. The man who did this to you? His eyes flicked to her arm. You do not need to worry about him. This is my line shack, and no one knows you are here except me. But Olivia, I need to splint this arm before the swelling gets worse. Do you understand? She nodded, then realized something. How do you know my name? You were talking in your sleep, calling out for your mama and saying your name. Said it was Olivia. His expression softened slightly. I am going to be as gentle as I can, but there is no way to make this not hurt. I have got some whiskey if you want it. No, she said quickly, the word coming out sharper than she intended. The smell of whiskey would always mean Martin now, would always mean violence. No whiskey. Just do what you need to do. Colt studied her for a moment, and she saw understanding flicker across his face. He nodded, then moved away briefly before returning with strips of cloth and 2 straight pieces of wood. I am going to need you to be very brave, he said quietly. On 3, all right? 1, 2. He moved on 2, not 3, and she realized later it was probably a mercy. Her scream echoed off the small cabin's walls as he pulled her arm straight, the broken bone grinding back into alignment. White-hot agony shot through her entire body, and for a moment she thought she might pass out again. But his hands were steady and sure as he quickly positioned the wood splints on either side of her forearm and began wrapping them tightly with the cloth strips. Almost done, he murmured, his voice gentle. Almost done, you are doing so well. Tears streamed down her face, but she bit her lip and tried not to scream again. When he finally tied off the last strip and sat back, she was shaking all over, not from cold this time, but from shock and pain. He disappeared for a moment and came back with a tin cup filled with water, which he held to her lips. Small sips, he instructed. Your body has been through a lot. The water was cool and clean, and she drank gratefully, only then realizing how thirsty she was. When she had finished, he set the cup aside and pulled the blankets back up around her shoulders. She realized she was wearing a shirt that was far too large for her, clearly his, and her wet dress was hanging near the fire to dry. I tried to be respectful, Colt said, clearly uncomfortable. But your dress was soaked through and you were half frozen. I left your undergarments on. Thank you, she whispered, for everything. You saved my life. You saved your own life by getting out of there, he said firmly. That took more courage than most people have. He paused, then added, the storm is still going strong outside. Probably will be for another day or 2. You are welcome to stay here as long as you need. There is food and water, and you will be safe. But my husband Martin will come looking for me. Not in this storm, he will not. And if he does find his way here, he will have to go through me first. There was steel in Colt's voice, and Olivia felt something loosen in her chest. When was the last time someone had protected her instead of hurt her? She wanted to ask him why he would risk himself for a stranger, but exhaustion was pulling at her again. Her eyelids felt heavy, and the pain in her arm had settled into a dull, constant ache that was almost bearable. Sleep, Colt said gently. I will keep watch. You are safe here, I promise. And somehow, despite everything, she believed him. She let her eyes close and drifted off to the sound of the fire and the storm outside, and for the first time in 3 years, she slept without fear. When Olivia woke again, pale light was filtering through the cabin's single window, and the sound of the wind had diminished to a low moan. Her arm still hurt, but it was manageable, and the warmth of the fire had chased away the bone, deep cold, from the night before. She turned her head and saw Colt sitting at a rough-hewn table, whittling something from a piece of wood. He looked up when he heard her stir and set his knife aside. How are you feeling? He asked, standing and walking over to her. Like I was trampled by a horse, she admitted. But better than last night. The storm? Still going, but not as fierce. Should blow over by tomorrow morning. He knelt beside her bedroll and gently touched the splint, checking his work. The swelling has not gotten worse. That is a good sign. Are you hungry? Her stomach answered for her, growling loudly enough that they both heard it. Colt smiled, and she saw she had been right about him smiling often. It transformed his whole face, made him look younger and less careworn. I will take that as a yes, he said. I have got some salt pork and beans, and I can make some decent biscuits if you do not mind them a bit singed on the bottom. I have not minded anything you have done so far, Olivia said, then felt her cheeks heat. I mean, you have been very kind. You do not need to thank me for being a decent human being, Colt said, but his tone was warm. Let me help you sit up so you can eat properly. He supported her with surprising gentleness as she maneuvered herself into a sitting position, her back against the log wall. The cabin was small but well built, with a stone fireplace, the table and 2 chairs, shelves with supplies, and the bedroll where she lay. Colt's saddle and gear were piled in one corner, and his rifle hung above the door. It was a Spartan existence, but it felt like a sanctuary compared to the cabin she had fled. Colt busied himself at the fire, putting together a meal with practiced efficiency. As he worked, Olivia studied him, trying to understand this man who had saved her. He moved with the easy confidence of someone comfortable in his own skin, and there was a quietness to him that she found soothing. He did not fill the silence with unnecessary words, did not seem to need constant attention or validation the way Martin always had. How long have you been a ranch hand? She asked, partly because she was curious, and partly because the silence was starting to feel heavy with all the things they were not talking about. Since I was 16, Colt said, stirring the pot of beans. My folks had a small farm in Missouri, but they both died of fever when I was 15. I headed west to make my own way. Ended up in Wyoming. Been working at the Double Creek for about 6 years now. It is good work, good people. You must know this area well then. Well enough. I know where the line shacks are, where the water is, where to find shelter in a storm. He glanced back at her. And I know which paths someone might take if they were running scared through a blizzard. I was not thinking about paths, Olivia admitted. I was just running. I figured. Colt ladled beans onto 2 tin plates and added a piece of salt pork to each, then brought one over to her along with a biscuit that was indeed slightly burned on the bottom. Can you manage with one hand? I will have to, she said, taking the plate. The food was simple, but hot and filling, and she realized she could not remember the last time she had eaten. Certainly not yesterday. Martin had been on one of his drinking binges, and she had learned long ago not to cook when he was in that state because he would just throw the food at her or knock it to the floor. They ate in companionable silence for a while, and Olivia felt some of her strength returning. When she had finished, Colt took her plate and set it aside, then poured them both coffee from a battered pot on the fire. The coffee was strong and bitter, but it warmed her from the inside out. Can I ask you something? Colt said, wrapping his hands around his own cup. Olivia tensed. I suppose. What will you do when the storm clears? Will you go back to him? No! The word came out fierce and certain, surprising even herself. Never. I would rather die than go back to Martin. Colt nodded slowly. Then you will need a plan. Does he know about this line shack? I do not think so. We have only been in the area for about 6 months. Martin was working at the sawmill in Rock Springs, but he got fired for showing up drunk. She stared into her coffee cup. We were living in a cabin about 5 miles from town. I do not even know which direction I ran. You ran east, Colt said. Probably about 3 miles before I found you. Your husband will not think to look for you here, but he might try to track you once the storm clears. You are going to need somewhere safe to go. I have nowhere, Olivia said quietly. My family is all dead. I have no money, no friends here. I suppose I could try to make it to Cheyenne. Find work there somehow. Cheyenne is almost 200 miles from here, Colt pointed out, and winter is not the time to be traveling alone, especially with a broken arm. Then what am I supposed to do? She heard the desperation in her own voice and hated it, hated feeling so helpless and dependent. Colt was quiet for a long moment, staring into the fire. Then he said, "The Double Creek always needs help during calving season, which starts in a few weeks. The boss's wife, Mrs. Patterson, runs the house and does the cooking for the hands. She could probably use an extra pair of hands, even if one of them is in a splint for a while. It would not be much, but you would have a roof over your head and food to eat, and you would be safe. The ranch is big enough that if your husband did come looking, there would be plenty of people to make sure he did not get near you." "Why would you do this for me?" Olivia asked, searching his face. "You do not know anything about me. I could be a thief or a liar or—" "You are a woman who had the courage to run through a blizzard rather than stay with a man who hurt her," Colt interrupted. "That tells me everything I need to know about your character. And as for why—" He paused, seeming to choose his words carefully. "I had a sister once, younger than me. She married a man who hit her, and I was too far away to help. By the time I got back to Missouri, she was dead. He said she fell down the stairs, and maybe she did, but I will always wonder if he pushed her." His jaw tightened. "I could not save her, but I can help you. So I will." Olivia felt tears prick her eyes. "I am sorry about your sister." "Me too." Colt set his coffee cup down and stood, clearly needing to move, to do something with his hands. "The offer stands. You do not have to decide right now. You have got at least another day before the storm clears anyway." "I do not need to decide," Olivia said. "If your boss and his wife will have me, I would be grateful for the work. More grateful than I can say." Something that looked like relief crossed Colt's face. "All right then. Once the weather clears and you are strong enough to travel, I will take you to the ranch. It is about a half-day's ride from here." "On a horse?" Olivia asked weakly. She had never been much of a rider. "We will take it slow, and I will not let you fall." The way he said it, so matter-of-fact and certain, made her believe him. The rest of that day passed quietly. The storm continued to rage outside, but inside the cabin, Olivia felt oddly peaceful. Colt went about his tasks with quiet efficiency, tending the fire, checking on the horses in the small attached lean-to, preparing meals. He did not press her to talk, but when she did speak, he listened with genuine attention. She found herself telling him things she had never told anyone about her childhood in Ohio, about how her parents had died within a year of each other, about how she had met Martin at a church social and thought he was charming and handsome and good. "He was good at first," she said, staring at the fire. "Or maybe he was just pretending. I do not know anymore. The drinking started about 6 months after we married, and the first time he hit me, he cried and apologized and swore he would never do it again. But he did, again and again, and each time I told myself it would get better, that I just needed to try harder, be quieter, not make him angry." She laughed bitterly. "It took having my arm broken for me to finally understand that it was never going to get better, that he was never going to change. It is not your fault, Colt said firmly. None of it. You understand that, right? You did not make him hit you. He chose to do that. I know that here, Olivia touched her head, but here, she touched her chest. It is harder to believe. It will get easier, Colt said. It will take time, but it will get easier. She wanted to believe him. As night fell and they prepared for sleep, Colt insisting she take the bedroll while he made himself a pallet near the fire, Olivia realized that for the first time in years, she felt something like hope. It was fragile and tentative, but it was there, a tiny spark in the darkness. And as she drifted off to sleep, listening to the wind howl outside and the fire crackle inside, she thought that maybe, just maybe, she was going to survive this after all. The next morning dawned clear and bitterly cold. Olivia woke to find Colt already up, standing at the window and looking out at the transformed landscape. Everything was white, buried under several feet of fresh snow that sparkled in the early morning sunlight. Storm passed, he announced when he heard her stirring. But it is going to take a day or two for the snow to pack down enough to travel safely. How are you feeling? Better, Olivia said, and it was true. The pain in her arm had lessened to a dull ache, and she felt more clear-headed than she had since the night she ran. I think I can stand up. Colt came over to help her, and she appreciated his steadying hand as she got to her feet. Her legs were wobbly from lying down for so long, but they held her. She took a few experimental steps, Colt staying close in case she faltered. There is an outhouse about 20 feet behind the cabin, he said. I will walk you out there if you need to go. I cleared a path this morning. The trip outside was an adventure, and Olivia was grateful for Colt's arm to lean on. The cold hit her like a slap, making her gasp, and the snow was piled higher than she had ever seen. When they returned to the cabin, her cheeks were flushed with cold and exertion, but she felt more human than she had in days. Over breakfast, more biscuits and salt pork, along with some preserved peaches that Colt produced from his supplies, they talked about the practicalities of getting Olivia to the ranch. She would need warmer clothes, and Colt improvised a warmer outfit from his own spare shirt and an extra pair of trousers that they had to cinch tight around her waist with a belt. She felt strange wearing men's clothing, but she had to admit it was more practical for riding than her thin dress. You are going to have to ride in front of me, Colt explained. I cannot have you on your own horse with that arm. I will control the reins, and you just hold on. If you need to rest, tell me, and we will stop. All right, Olivia agreed. She trusted him by now, this quiet cowboy who had saved her life and asked for nothing in return. They spent the rest of that day and the next preparing for the journey and letting Olivia build up her strength. Colt showed her how to flex and move her fingers to keep the circulation going in her injured arm, taught her how to wrap extra cloth around the splint to cushion it. He told her stories about ranch life, about the cattle drives and the roundups, about the vast Wyoming landscape, and the hard but satisfying work. She found herself looking forward to this new life, whatever it might bring, because it had to be better than what she had left behind. On the third morning after the storm, they set out at first light. The sun was brilliant on the snow, almost blinding, and the air was so cold it hurt to breathe. Colt lifted Olivia onto his horse with surprising ease, then swung up behind her. His arms came around her to take the reins, and she felt the solid warmth of his chest against her back. It was strange to be this close to a man and feel safe instead of afraid, to lean into his strength instead of flinching away from it. Ready? Colt asked, his breath warm against her ear. Ready, Olivia confirmed, and they rode out into the white wilderness. The journey took longer than Colt had predicted because the snow was deep and they had to pick their way carefully. But Colt was patient and careful, stopping frequently to let Olivia rest and making sure she was not in too much pain. They ate a cold lunch of jerky and hardtack while sitting on a fallen log, Colt brushing snow off at first so she would not get wet. Tell me about the Pattersons, Olivia said, gnawing on the jerky. What are they like? Good people, Colt said without hesitation. Tom Patterson inherited the ranch from his father about 10 years ago. He is fair and works as hard as any of his hands. His wife, Sarah, is probably the kindest woman I have ever met. She and Tom have 3 kids, all under 10. Sarah runs the household and does all the cooking, which is no small feat when you are feeding 15 ranch hands plus your own family. She is going to love having help, I promise you that. What if she does not like me? She will like you, Colt said confidently. And even if she did not, which she will, you would still have a place there. Tom Patterson does not tolerate meanness or cruelty. He fired a hand last year for being rough with the horses. You will fit in fine. Olivia wanted to believe him, but nerves fluttered in her stomach as they continued on. She was about to walk into a household full of strangers and ask them to take her in. What if they thought she was trouble? What if they made her go back to Martin? As if sensing her anxiety, Colt said quietly, "You are going to be all right. I will make sure of it." And somehow, those simple words were enough to calm her racing thoughts. The sun was starting to dip toward the horizon when they finally crested a rise, and Colt said, "There it is." Olivia looked down into the valley below and saw the Double Creek Ranch spread out like something from a dream. The main house was large and well built, with smoke curling from 2 chimneys. There were several outbuildings, a huge barn, and corrals that were currently empty because of the winter. In the distance, she could see cattle clustered near windbreaks, dark shapes against the snow. "It is beautiful," she breathed. "It is home," Colt said simply, and urged his horse forward. As they approached the main house, the front door opened and a woman stepped out, shading her eyes against the low sun. She was in her mid-30s, with dark blonde hair pulled back in a practical bun and a sturdy build that suggested she was no stranger to hard work. When she recognized Colt, her face broke into a smile. "Colt Jennings, where have you been?" Tom was about to send out a search party. Then she noticed Olivia, and her expression shifted to concern. "Who is this?" Colt dismounted and then carefully helped Olivia down, keeping a steadying hand on her good arm. "This is Olivia Nelson, Mrs. Patterson. I found her during the storm. She needs help." Sarah Patterson was down the porch steps in an instant, her sharp eyes taking in Olivia's splinted arm, her borrowed clothes, and her pale face. Whatever she saw there made her expression soften immediately. "You poor thing. Come inside right now, both of you. It is freezing out here, and you look half dead on your feet." The warmth of the house enveloped Olivia like a hug. The front door opened directly into a large main room, with a fireplace at one end and a long table with benches at the other. Doorways led off to what she assumed were bedrooms and a kitchen. 3 children were playing near the fire, a boy of about 8 and 2 younger girls. They all looked up with wide, curious eyes when the adults entered. "Michael, run and fetch your father from the barn," Sarah instructed the boy, who immediately scrambled up and out the door. Then she turned her attention back to Olivia. "Sit down before you fall down. Colt, get her some water. And then I want to hear the whole story." Olivia sank gratefully into a chair near the fire, and Sarah knelt in front of her, gently examining the splint on her arm. "Did you do this, Colt?" "Yes, madam. It was clearly broken, so I set it as best I could." "You did a fine job," Sarah said approvingly. "But we should probably get Doc Harris to look at it when the road's clear." "Now what happened?" Olivia glanced at Colt, who nodded encouragingly. So she told the story again, leaving out some of the more painful details, but making it clear that her husband had hurt her and she had run. Sarah's expression grew darker as she listened, and when Olivia finished, the older woman's mouth was set in a grim line. "You did the right thing running," Sarah said firmly, "and you are welcome to stay here as long as you need. We can always use help around the place, especially during calving season. Can you cook?" "Yes, madam. And sew and clean and tend a garden." "Then you will earn your keep and then some. We have a small room off the kitchen that you can have. It is not fancy, but it is private and warm." Sarah stood and put her hands on her hips. As for your husband, if he comes around here looking for trouble, he will find more than he bargained for. Tom does not hold with men who hurt women, and neither do I." Tears pricked Olivia's eyes again. "Thank you. I do not know how to repay you for this kindness." "You do not have to repay kindness," Sarah said. "You just pass it on when you get the chance. Now let me show you where you will be staying, and then we will get some proper food into you. You look like you have not had a decent meal in weeks." The room off the kitchen was small but clean, with a narrow bed, a washstand, and a peg on the wall for hanging clothes. To Olivia, it looked like paradise. Sarah left her to rest while she went to prepare supper, and Olivia sat on the edge of the bed, trying to process the whirlwind of change her life had undergone in just a few days. A soft knock at the door made her look up. Colt stood in the doorway, his hat in his hands. "Just wanted to check on you before I head to the bunkhouse. You settling in all right?" "Yes. Thank you, Colt, for everything. I owe you my life." "You do not owe me anything," he said, echoing Sarah's words. "I am just glad you are safe. The bunkhouse is just across the yard if you need anything, and I will be around." He hesitated, then added, "I meant what I said. You are going to be all right here." "I believe you," Olivia said, and realized she did. After he left, she lay down on the bed, just for a moment, and immediately fell into the deepest sleep she had known in years. The next few weeks passed in a blur of activity as Olivia settled into her new life at the Double Creek. True to her word, Sarah put her to work as soon as her arm was strong enough, starting with light tasks like folding laundry and peeling vegetables, and gradually working up to more demanding jobs. The splint came off after 6 weeks when Doc Harris finally made it out to the ranch, and though her arm was weak and stiff, the doctor pronounced it well healed. "Whoever set this did a fine job," Doc Harris said, rotating her arm gently to test the range of motion. "Another few weeks of using it and you will be almost as good as new." Olivia knew who had saved not just her life but her arm, and she made a point of thanking Colt the next time she saw him. He had been true to his word about being around, often stopping by the main house for a cup of coffee or helping with repairs around the homestead. Olivia found herself looking forward to these visits more than she wanted to admit. There was something about Colt that drew her in his quiet strength, his gentle humor, the way he treated everyone with respect, regardless of their station. She watched him interact with the Patterson children, letting them climb on him like a jungle gym and never losing his patience even when little Emma knocked over his coffee. She saw how the other ranch hands respected him, how even Tom Patterson sought his opinion on ranch matters. And she could not help but notice how her heart seemed to beat a little faster whenever he walked into a room. It was foolish, she told herself. She had just escaped one marriage. She had no business thinking about another man. And yet she could not seem to stop thinking about him, could not stop noticing the way his eyes crinkled when he smiled, or how capable his hands were, or how safe she felt whenever he was near. Spring came slowly to Wyoming, the snow melting in fits and starts, and the days gradually growing longer. Calving season began in earnest, and the ranch became a hive of activity as new calves were born almost daily. Olivia found herself working from dawn until late at night, helping Sarah prepare enormous meals for the exhausted ranch hands and taking care of the household while Sarah dealt with various ranch crises. It was during one of these long days that Martin finally appeared. Olivia was in the kitchen, kneading bread dough, when she heard raised voices from the yard. Her blood turned to ice when she recognized Martin's voice, loud and belligerent, demanding to know where his wife was. She froze, her hands still buried in the dough, her heart pounding so hard she thought it might burst from her chest. Sarah appeared in the kitchen doorway, her face set in hard lines. "Stay here," she commanded. "Tom is handling it." But Olivia could not stay. She had to see, had to know. She wiped her hands on her apron and moved to the window, peering out through the glass. Martin was in the yard, swaying slightly, clearly drunk even though it was barely noon. Tom Patterson stood between Martin and the house, his stance casual but his eyes hard, and behind Tom stood Colt and 3 other ranch hands, all of them armed. I am telling you one more time, Tom was saying, his voice carrying clearly in the cold air. Your wife is not here, and even if she was, I would not let you near her. She belongs to me, Martin shouted. I got rights. She is my wife. You lost any rights you had when you broke her arm, Colt said, and his voice was cold in a way Olivia had never heard before. Now get off this property before we make you leave. Martin's face turned an ugly shade of red. You got no right to keep a man from his wife. I will get the law involved. Go ahead, Tom said mildly. Sheriff Dawson is a good friend of mine, and I am sure he would be very interested to hear about a man who beats his wife. Now you have got about 10 seconds to get on that horse and ride out before my men escort you off the property, and I promise you will not enjoy that. For a moment, Olivia thought Martin might actually try to fight, but even drunk, he could apparently recognize when he was outmatched. With a string of curses that made even the ranch hands wince, he stumbled to his horse and hauled himself into the saddle. Before he rode off, his eyes swept across the house, and for one terrible moment, they locked with Olivia's through the window. The hatred in his gaze made her step back involuntarily, her hand coming up to her throat. But then he was gone, galloping out of the yard and disappearing down the road. Olivia sagged against the wall, shaking all over. Sarah was beside her in an instant, strong arms pulling her into a hug. He is gone. He will not come back. Tom made sure of that. You do not know Martin, Olivia whispered. He does not give up. He will come back. He will do nothing, a new voice said firmly, and Olivia looked up to see Colt standing in the kitchen doorway. His face was still set in those hard lines, but his eyes softened when they landed on her. Tom told him if he sets foot on this property again, we will shoot him for trespassing, and he believed it because it was the truth. He will find another way to hurt me, Olivia said. He always does. Colt crossed the kitchen in 3 long strides and took her by the shoulders, careful not to jostle her recently healed arm. Look at me, he commanded, and she did. He cannot hurt you anymore. You are not alone and helpless now. You have got a whole ranch full of people who will stand between you and him. Do you understand that? I understand, Olivia whispered, but I am still scared. Being scared is not the same as being helpless, Colt said. You can be scared and still be safe. And you are safe here. I promise you that. Sarah had discreetly slipped out of the kitchen, leaving them alone. Colt's hands were still on Olivia's shoulders, and she could feel the warmth of them even through her dress. They were standing very close, close enough that she could see the flecks of gray in his blue eyes and the faint scar on his chin. Why do you care so much? She asked quietly. I know you said it was because of your sister, but there has to be more than that. Colt was quiet for a long moment, and she thought he might not answer. Then he said, At first it was because of my sister, but now it is because of you. Because you are brave and kind and stronger than you give yourself credit for. Because you make me smile even on the hardest days. Because he stopped, seeming to struggle with the words. Because somewhere along the way I started to care about you. Not just because you needed help, but because of who you are. Olivia's breath caught. Colt, I know you probably are not ready to hear this, he said quickly. I know you just got out of a bad marriage and you need time to heal. I am not asking you for anything, Olivia. I just wanted you to know that you matter to me, that you are not just some stray I picked up in a storm. You are important. She did not think, just acted, rising up on her toes and pressing her lips to his. The kiss was brief and chaste, but it sent warmth flooding through her entire body. When she pulled back, Colt was staring at her with wide, startled eyes. I care about you too, Olivia said. I did not think I could feel this way about anyone again, not after Martin. But you are nothing like him. You are kind and patient, and you make me feel safe. And I think I might be falling in love with you. You think? Colt asked, and there was a hint of amusement in his voice now, though his eyes were serious. I know, Olivia corrected. I know I am falling in love with you. But I am also terrified, because the last time I loved a man, it nearly destroyed me. I am not going to destroy you, Colt said firmly. I am going to spend every day proving to you that love does not have to hurt, that it can be gentle and kind and steady, if you will let me. I want to let you, Olivia whispered. I want that so much. This time when they kissed, it was slower, deeper, full of promise and possibility. Colt's arms came around her, holding her close, but not too tight, always mindful of her still healing arm. Olivia felt something inside her chest unfurl, like a flower opening to the sun after a long winter. This was what love was supposed to feel like, safe and warm and right. They were interrupted by a discreet cough from the doorway. Sarah stood there, trying and failing to hide a smile. Sorry to intrude, but there is a kitchen full of hungry ranch hands waiting for lunch, and that bread dough is not going to knead itself. Olivia felt her cheeks flame, but she was smiling as she stepped out of Colt's arms. I will get right on it, Mrs. Patterson. Take your time, Sarah said with a wink. And Colt, Tom is looking for you. Something about a fence that needs mending. I will be right there, Colt said, but his eyes never left Olivia's face. Can I see you later? After supper? I would like that, Olivia said softly. He smiled, that full, bright smile that transformed his face, and headed out to his work. Olivia turned back to her bread dough, but she could not stop smiling. Sarah came to stand beside her, picking up another ball of dough to knead. He is a good man, Sarah said quietly. One of the best I have ever known. I know, Olivia replied. I am just starting to believe that I deserve a good man. Oh, honey, Sarah said, bumping her shoulder gently against Olivia's. You always deserved that. You just needed to find someone who could show you. That evening, after the dishes were washed and the kitchen cleaned, Olivia slipped out onto the front porch where Colt was waiting. The spring air was cool but not cold, and the stars were just beginning to come out overhead. He was sitting on the porch steps, and he smiled when he saw her, patting the space beside him in invitation. Olivia sat down, close enough that their shoulders touched. For a while, they just sat in comfortable silence, listening to the sounds of the ranch settling down for the night, horses nickering in the barn, cattle lowing in the distance, the wind rustling through the newly green grass. Tell me something about yourself, Colt said eventually. Something I do not know. Olivia thought for a moment. When I was a little girl, I wanted to be a teacher. I loved books and learning, and I thought it would be wonderful to help children learn to read. What stopped you? Life, I suppose. My parents died, and I needed to survive, not dream. And then I met Martin, and he did not think it was appropriate for his wife to work. She paused. What about you? What did you dream of being when you were young? I wanted to have my own ranch, Colt said. Nothing huge, just a small spread where I could raise horses and cattle and build a life. I have been saving my wages for years, putting aside every penny I can. Someday, I am going to have enough to buy some land and make that dream come true. That sounds wonderful, Olivia said softly. It will be even better if I have someone to share it with, Colt said, taking her hand in his. I am not asking you to marry me, not yet, but I want you to know that when I think about my future now, you are in it, if you want to be. I want to be, Olivia said, squeezing his hand. But I need time, Colt. Time to figure out who I am without Martin. Time to heal. Time to be sure. Take all the time you need, Colt said. I am not going anywhere. And he meant it. Over the following months, as spring turned into summer and summer into fall, Colt courted Olivia with a patience and gentleness that sometimes made her want to cry. He brought her wildflowers from the range and fresh fish from the creek. He taught her to ride properly, spending hours in the corral with her until she felt confident in the saddle. He sat with her on the porch in the evenings, talking about everything and nothing, sharing dreams and fears and memories. He never pushed, never demanded more than she was ready to give. When she had nightmares about Martin, which happened less and less frequently but still caught her by surprise, sometimes Colt would hold her and remind her that she was safe, that Martin had left Wyoming Territory entirely according to the last report from Sheriff Dawson. When she flinched at a sudden movement or a raised voice, Colt would slow down and gentle his tone, giving her space to breathe and remember that she was not in danger. And slowly, gradually, Olivia found herself healing. The scared, broken woman who had run through a blizzard began to transform into someone stronger, more confident. She laughed more easily now, smiled more often. She started making friends with the other women in the area, joining Sarah for quilting bees and church socials. She even started teaching the Patterson children their letters in the evenings, rediscovering her love of books and learning. Through it all, Colt was there, steady and constant as the mountains on the horizon, and Olivia fell more in love with him every day. It was a crisp October evening, nearly a year after Colt had found her in the blizzard, when he asked her to go for a walk with him. They wandered away from the ranch buildings, out to a small rise that overlooked the valley. The autumn colors were spectacular. The aspen trees turned gold, and the sky painted with the purple and orange of sunset. "I have been thinking," Colt said, as they stood looking out over the land. "Tom offered to sell me a parcel of land on the eastern edge of the property, 200 acres with good water and grazing. It is a fair price, and I have almost enough saved up." "That is wonderful," Olivia exclaimed. "Your dream is coming true." "Part of it," Colt agreed. He turned to face her, taking both of her hands in his. "But the dream is not complete without you. Olivia, I love you. I have loved you since you kissed me in Sarah's kitchen, and probably before that if I am being honest. I want to build that ranch with you. I want to wake up next to you every morning and fall asleep beside you every night. I want to have a family with you, raise horses and cattle and kids together, grow old watching sunsets like this one." He dropped to one knee, and Olivia's breath caught. "Will you marry me?" Tears were streaming down Olivia's face, but they were good tears, happy tears. "Yes," she said, pulling him to his feet. "Yes, I will marry you. I love you, Colt. I love you so much." He kissed her then, deep and thorough and full of promise, and Olivia thought that this was what happiness felt like. Not the giddy, uncertain feeling she had with Martin, but something deeper and more solid, built on trust and respect and genuine love. They were married on a bright November day, with the whole ranch in attendance. Sarah helped Olivia make a dress from soft blue calico, and the Patterson girls wove flowers into her hair. Tom Patterson stood up as Colt's best man, and Sarah stood with Olivia. The ceremony was simple, held in the small church in Rock Springs, with the traveling preacher who made his rounds through the territory. When Colt said his vows, his voice was steady and sure. "I promise to love you, to protect you, to honor you all the days of my life. I promise that my hands will only ever hold you gently, that my words will only ever build you up, that my love will be a safe place for you to rest. I give you my heart, freely and completely, for as long as I draw breath." Olivia cried through her own vows, but they were tears of joy. "I promise to love you with all that I am, to trust you with my heart, to build a life with you that is full of laughter and light. You save me in more ways than one, and I promise to spend the rest of my life showing you how grateful I am that you found me in that storm. I love you, Colt Jennings, and I always will." When the preacher pronounced them husband and wife, the entire congregation cheered. Colt kissed her thoroughly, and Olivia felt like she might burst from happiness. The reception was held at the ranch, with Sarah and the other ranch wives putting together a feast that could feed an army. There was music and dancing, and Colt whirled Olivia around the barn floor until she was breathless and laughing. When they finally left for their own small cabin, Tom had let them use one of the line shacks while they built their house on the new land. Olivia felt like she was floating. That night, as they lay together in the small bed, Colt held her close and whispered, "Are you happy?" "Happier than I ever thought possible," Olivia said honestly. When I ran through that blizzard, I thought my life was over, but it was just beginning. It is just beginning for both of us, Colt agreed, pressing a kiss to her forehead. Everything good starts from here. And it did. The next few years were the happiest of Olivia's life. They built their house together, a modest but sturdy structure with a good fireplace and a porch that faced the sunrise. Colt started his horse and cattle operation, and Olivia helped with everything from breaking horses to branding calves. It was hard work, but it was satisfying, and every night they fell into bed exhausted but content. Their first child, a son, was born in the spring of 1879. They named him Thomas, after Tom Patterson, and he had his father's dark hair and his mother's determination. Colt was a devoted father, gentle and patient with the baby, and Olivia sometimes cried watching him sing their son to sleep, thinking about how different this was from the life she had expected. 2 years later, they had a daughter they named Rose, with blonde curls and a sunny disposition, and 3 years after that, another son, James, who was quieter and more thoughtful than his siblings. Their house was full of noise and laughter and the organized chaos of a young family, and Olivia loved every minute of it. The ranch prospered. Colt had a good eye for horses, and his breeding program produced some of the finest working horses in the territory. They added to their land holdings bit by bit, building a solid, successful operation. Money was never plentiful, but they always had enough, and more importantly, they had each other. Olivia never saw Martin again. She heard through the grapevine that he had moved to Nevada and died in a mining accident a few years after she left him. When she got the news, she felt nothing, no grief, no relief, just a quiet acknowledgement that that chapter of her life was truly closed. She never forgot what she had survived, but it no longer defined her. Instead, she was defined by the love she had built with Colt, by the family they had created together, by the life they had carved out of the rough Wyoming landscape. She taught all three of their children to read, fulfilling that old dream of being a teacher in her own way. She became known in the community as someone with a kind word and a helping hand for anyone in need, particularly women in difficult situations. On their 10th wedding anniversary, Colt took Olivia back to the place where he had found her, the gully where she had collapsed in the blizzard. It was summer now, and the place was completely transformed. Wildflowers bloomed in profusion, and a small creek burbled nearby. "I wanted to show you this," Colt said, taking her hand, "because I want you to see how far you have come. That woman who was running scared through the snow, she is still part of you, but she is not all of you. You are so much more now." "We are so much more," Olivia corrected, squeezing his hand. "I could not have become this person without you. And I could not have become the man I am without you," Colt replied. "We made each other better. That is what love does." They stood there for a while, hand in hand, looking at the place where their story had begun. Then they turned and walked back to their horses, back to their home, back to their children, and their life together. Years passed, measured not in hardship, but in joy. They celebrated birthdays and anniversaries, weathered bad winters and dry summers, mourned losses, and celebrated victories. They watched their children grow into capable, kind adults who went on to build lives of their own. Thomas took over the horse breeding operation, Rose married a neighboring rancher's son, and James became a teacher, making his mother proud. Colt and Olivia grew older together, their dark hair turning gray, their faces lined with years of laughter and hard work. But their love never diminished. If anything, it grew stronger, deepened by the years and the experiences they had shared. On a warm spring evening in 1910, Colt and Olivia sat on the porch of their home, watching the sunset paint the sky in brilliant colors. They were in their 60s now, both still active but moving a bit slower than they used to. Colt's hand was wrapped around Olivia's, just as it had been for more than 30 years. "Do you ever think about that night?" Colt asked softly. "The night I found you?" "Sometimes," Olivia admitted, "but not with sadness anymore. I think about it with gratitude, because that was the night everything changed. That was the night I found you. I found you, Colt corrected with a smile. We found each other, Olivia said, and I would run through 1,000 blizzards if I knew you would be waiting at the end. Colt leaned over and kissed her, slow and sweet, and Olivia marveled at how a simple touch from this man could still make her heart race after all these years. This was what she had been searching for all along without knowing it, not a fairy tale romance, but a real, deep, abiding love that weathered every storm and emerged stronger on the other side. I love you, Colt said, his blue eyes still as clear and kind as they had been that first day in the line shack. I love you too, Olivia replied. Always and forever. As the sun dipped below the horizon and the stars began to emerge, they sat together in the peaceful silence, two souls who had found each other in the midst of a blizzard and built a lifetime of love from that chance encounter. Their children and grandchildren were scattered across Wyoming, carrying forward the values of kindness and resilience that Colt and Olivia had instilled in them. The ranch continued to prosper under Thomas's capable management. The horses they bred were sought after across the territory, and the Jennings name was synonymous with integrity and hard work. But more than any material success, what Colt and Olivia had built was a family rooted in love and respect, a safe haven where everyone was valued and cared for. They had taken the pain of Olivia's past and transformed it into something beautiful, proving that even the darkest nights could give way to the brightest dawns. The stars wheeled overhead in their ancient patterns, and somewhere in the distance, a coyote called to its mate. Colt and Olivia sat together on their porch, hands clasped, hearts intertwined, grateful for every moment they had been given and for the love that had carried them through it all. The wind whispered through the grass, carrying with it the scent of wildflowers and the promise of another beautiful day to come, another day to spend together in the life they had built from nothing but courage, hope, and a love that had proven stronger than any storm.